while last night all of the chaos was reigning and things were happening, we can't say for sure who was doing it because there was incredibly suspicious behavior going on. Donald Trump decided to weigh in, and here is what he had to say. I can't stand back and watch this happen to a great American city, Minneapolis. A total lack of leadership. Either the very weak radical left mayor, Jacob... God, all these tweets are filled with absolute nonsense. That's so disconnected from reality. Get his act together and bring the city under control, or I will send in the National Guard and get the job done right. These thugs are dishonoring the memory of George Floyd, and I won't let that happen. Just spoke to Governor Tim Walz and told him that the military is with him all the way. Any difficulty and we will assume control, but when the looting starts, the shooting starts. Thank you. Okay, so it's 20% more explicit now. Who Trump is, what his movement is, what they want, and what he plans to deliver for them. We are supposed to read that tweet and pretend that he's just the same as every other politician, that it's all the same, it's all equal. He's not scary or dangerous in any fundamental way. He's only using his social media to broadcast to more than 50 million people. I think it might be 80 million followers of his, that looters should be shot, that he might send in the military to begin killing these protesters. Or, hypothetically, we understand the nature of stochastic terrorism. I mean, we've already got professional agitators on the ground there. Maybe some militia members in the area, some white supremacists. Your leader, the guy you worship, is saying looters should be shot. And so, if people get shot today, if they get killed, are we supposed to just say, seems crazy to think that that might be linked to Donald Trump saying that looters should be shot. It's absurd to state that. We had to watch this roll in, and we're going to have the defense because he's being defended, because there's nothing he can say, no call for violence so explicit that they won't defend it. But that's what we had last night from the president. Shoot the looters.
Donald Trump never misses an opportunity to pour gasoline on the fire. This is what he wants. Don't make the mistake of thinking that Trump is actually concerned about what's happening in Minneapolis today. And by the way, it's not just Minneapolis. There have been protests in other major cities in the US as well.
Yes.
And it's because of this nonstop oppression people have been feeling, especially the most powerless people in this country. And again, if they feel that they have nothing left to lose, if they feel that there is no form of protest that's deemed acceptable by the naysayers, they're going to rebel. And that's what we're seeing in this country right now. And Donald Trump loves it because he can use it to further divide the country in a way that he deems politically advantageous for himself.
Mm-hmm.
What Trump has done over and over again is incite violence, celebrate violence when it's committed by certain people. If we want to have a discussion about violence in America, I think it's important to talk about state-sponsored violence, which is what we see every single day. The very Republicans, the very lawmakers who are defending Donald Trump's statement are also the same ones who have, and by the way, they're defending Donald Trump's statement and they're criticizing the protesters. But they were never critical of Donald Trump pushing for the death of immigrant children at the border. I mean, how many stories did we read about minors found dead, surrounded in their own vomit in Trump's border cages?
Yeah.
But they didn't care. They didn't care. What about that kind of state-sponsored violence that actually leads to death? Donald Trump loves this. He incites violence all the time. He incited violence when it came to the anti-stay-at-home protesters. He incited violence when it came to those neo-Nazis and white supremacists in Charlottesville, which also led to the murder of a counter-protester, Heather Heyer. Donald Trump's legacy will be riddled, has already been riddled, with instances of murder, death, and violence. So he has absolutely no leg to stand on when he says that he's concerned about the violent actions of protesters in Minneapolis. He's absolutely full of crap.
Yeah, no. No, he wants violence. He just wants a particular type. And more importantly, his movement wants that type. I mean, we can't pretend that there aren't millions of Americans that want the National Guard to go into inner cities and start shooting people. It's crazy, but that is the truth. His movement is thirsty, desperate for violence. That's what they want. Some of them very explicitly. The anti-lockdown protesters with their boogaloo and all that, wanting a civil war or race war or whatever, they're very clear about it. But 10, 100 times as many want it, but won't necessarily put it on a sign and flaunt it. But that's what they want. And it couldn't be more explicit. I mean, as many people have pointed out, you just saw his tweets about the protests in Minneapolis. Take a look at his tweets from less than a month ago when he said, the governor of Michigan should give a little and put out the fire. These are very good people, but they are angry. They want their lives back again, safely. See them, talk to them, make a deal. The difference was that those were angry white people toting guns, mad that they can't go to a bakery or get their hair done or something. There, you have to give them whatever they want. I mean, sure, they're bringing semi-automatic rifles and they're going into the Capitol building and implying violence against the government of Michigan. But just give them whatever they want. Come on, they're good people. But when people get angry because another one of their own was murdered on videotape, and up until a few minutes ago, the cop hadn't even been arrested. Apparently, it has been confirmed now. Jill Colvin reporting that Chauvin has been arrested. They're illegitimate. It's an explicitly white identitarian movement. That's what it is. It is a fascist white nationalist movement. That's why they throw the identity politics stuff in our face constantly. It is just projection. It is a white nationalist movement. That's what it is. And they want racial violence. When Trump promises that, it's not some risky gamut. It's a sure thing. It's a slam dunk for him. This is what his fans want. That's why they're backing him up today about that.
I know. Look, I'm terrified about what the future holds for this country. I just am. And I don't see, look, this is anecdotal. It's on social media. So I don't want anyone to think that this is necessarily indicative of what we're seeing overall from the centrist Democrat response. But they're talking about how this is the progressives' fault. Like on Twitter, like I've seen threads about that. And all I can do when I see stuff like that is think about what transpired in 2016 and how differently things would have been if the DNC wasn't so obsessed with putting this entitled woman, Hillary Clinton, in the position of the Democratic candidate. You know what I'm saying? Like, what would happen if we had a real free and fair Democratic primary in 2016 without the DNC playing any of the games that it played? And, who knows? Maybe it would have been Hillary Clinton, but there's a good chance that the Democratic nominee could have been Bernie Sanders, and he had a much better chance of beating the fascists that we have in office right now. And we could have been in a completely different situation. I mean, we could have been having a debate right now about whether it makes sense to build, 100 million units for affordable housing, or maybe we should start off slow with 50 million units. Yeah. Like, that's the kind of debate I imagined we'd be having. But instead, people continue to be mutilated, brutalized, and murdered in our country, with a significant portion of our politicians defending that behavior.
Yeah. Yeah. We've got a few more aspects of the tweets. I want to give you one because there's a name that has come up in the past few days for good reason. I want to give you Amy Klobuchar's response. She tweeted, in response to Trump's shooting tweet, that's in her tweet, "Our community is hurting for justice and charges for George Floyd. Vandalism must stop, but we need systemic reform, like a full-scale DOJ pattern practice investigation of Minneapolis police, like I've called for. So much better than a tweet." Yeah, that would be better than Trump's tweet. But you know what would have been better than your tweet? If you had gotten that cop off the street back when you had the power to do that and chose not to. So this is an interesting way to cover for yourself. But there is every reason to believe that if she had taken her job seriously back then, we wouldn't have had any of this. We wouldn't have had the murder, wouldn't have had anything from it.
It is incredible how much your views change once you're auditioning for a position of power, like a VP pick for a Democratic presidential candidate. All of a sudden, you believe in justice. Mm-hmm. Strange.
That is weird.
I think I think real leaders show leadership and strength in times when their ideas and their policy proposals might be unpopular, right? A real leader does what's right in a moment when it's unpopular to do so because they know it's the right thing to do. We don't have very many of those politicians. Not many of them exist, right? So it's not just about Amy Klobuchar. I just want people to start thinking about the motivations and intentions behind what politicians do and say. Yeah. Because, John, you and I know a lot about the grifters in media, but the political world is chock full of them, right? And it's all about their own, personal ambitions and where they're going to go next in their careers. It's not about doing right in representing the best interests of Americans and their constituents. It's just not. And we need to call them out when we see it, and we need to do so aggressively.
I couldn't agree more. I'd pulled, in response to Trump saying that we should shoot people who are doing the looting, I'd pulled a 1985 Supreme Court decision that lays out in great detail why it is not acceptable for the police to gun down people who are getting away for nonviolent crimes. But then I realized I'm going to save myself some time. If you need to have that explained to you, get off my channel. Don't watch my videos. I don't want your support. It's on its face not acceptable. That's all that I'm going to say about it.
Check out the Damage Report podcast each day, wherever you get your podcasts, whether Pocket Casts or Stitcher or iTunes. You can join me as I give you the news and stories you want, with a range of co-hosts and interview guests jumping in on the fun each day. Again, that's the Damage Report, wherever you get your podcasts. And if you get them at iTunes, don't forget to rate and review. Sometimes I'll read them live on the show.